The year was 2019. Jonathan Hickman decided that peace was never an option and released the 2 comic book series titled Powers of X and House of X, featuring the most diabolical retcon to ever exist. Moira McTaggart, the long-term ally of Charles Xavier and the X-Men, a Nobel laureate in the field of genetics, well, she got a complete character redo, which left fans shaken to their core. So let's learn all about Moira's mutancy and how it affected her throughout the entire X-Men storyline. Now, just before we go into our video, we have a small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's just a small click for you, but for us it means an awful lot. Now, thank you very much. We'll begin. Backstory of Moira McTaggart. Moira was born into the powerful Scottish noble family known as the Kinross. Her life was simple and sweet. She grew up into a budding young lady without many problems. Sure, she caught a mysterious fever that nearly killed her, but when she woke up the next day, she was fresh as a daisy and there wasn't much thought put behind it. Kids get sick, and then kids get better. Sometimes it's miraculous and we don't need to question it. Moira led a simple life. She grew up to become a young lady and eventually got married to the love of her life, Kenneth Cowan. Together they had 3 children, 2 boys named Callum and Dean, and a beautiful baby daughter named Abigail. Her children grew up and had their own kids, and Moira couldn't have asked for more. She had a big family full of love and she was happy. Every year she would look forward to the holidays where the whole family would come together, much to her delight and joy. Losing Kenneth was hard for Moira. After so many years together, she lost her husband when she was 68, and that left her a bit lost. However, her large family full of love was more than enough to keep her going. At the ripe age of 74, Moira herself passed away from congestive heart failure. It was a peaceful life all in all, full of love and the tribulations of a large family. Moira was a good person. Rest in peace, Moira. You'll be missed. Or will she? So almost like Groundhog Day, Moira wakes up again, this time in the womb of her mother. You would think that being trapped in the womb of your mother while being sentient would drive you to madness, but that's not exactly what happened. Moira felt like she was in a safe cocoon. Her mother was her home. But Moira knew that life wouldn't be that zen once she was outside the womb. You see, Moira remembered everything about her first life, every single detail. It turns out in her previous life form, when she ended up with the fever, her powers were activated, but they didn't manifest until she passed away. Now that she was alive again, with every memory of her previous life, Moira had a target. She no longer wanted the whole family life. She knew every flaw that Kenneth had, and she knew she could never fix them. She didn't wish to go through all of that again, and nobody could blame her for it. So instead, she decides to push herself in the direction of academia. Thanks to those mutant powers, Moira already knew everything that she needed to learn in school. She was quickly labelled as brilliant and talented. That made it easier for her to follow along the path of academia. She focused on psychology and biology, trying to figure out what actually happened to her. Moira thought she was actually going through psychosis, but when the experiments that she did on herself proved otherwise, she had no choice but to accept it. At the age of 44, Moira heard about Charles Xavier on the television. She listened to him talk about the Homo superior, and she realized that maybe, just maybe, she too was a mutant. But to be sure, Moira wanted to meet Charles, so she booked the first plane to the United States of America and boarded. However, this time round, she didn't get to meet Charles because her aircraft crashed into the ocean, pulling the curtains on her second life. When Moira started her third life, she realized that it was necessary to do work on the genetic aspect of mutancy. She was still academically bright, and soon enough she started her classes at Oxford University. There she noticed Charles Xavier, but she never approached him. Hearing him talk about his plans made him come off as arrogant and selfish, and Moira didn't entirely agree with what Charles was spewing, so instead she minded her own business. Given that the gene that gave the mutants power can be classified as an unwanted mutation within the genetic code, Moira decided that perhaps this would be the way to deal with mutants. Her degrees in anthropology and genetics helped her understand just how species with so much similarity can survive in similar environments and yet be so different. Moira decided the best way to go about this, on the whole, would just be to cure mutations. She spent her entire life developing a cure that would turn mutants into humans. However, that cure never did see the light of day. Unbeknownst to her, Moira was on a hit list of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So right on the day she did manage to find that cure, the Brotherhood decided to pay her a congratulatory visit. Unlike most people, the Brotherhood insisted on celebrating this breakthrough by meticulously breaking through all the machinery and hard drives within the laboratory. Every friend and co-worker was killed in front of Moira's eyes, while she was left tied to a chair. This is when Irene Adler, better known as Destiny, the precognitive mutant, decided to explain the reason for their visit. Destiny mused about how her powers showed how much Moira could do for mutant kind, and how it was a shame claimed that Moira was instead betraying her own kind. Moira protested, saying that her cure wasn't for everyone, it was for people who wanted to be cured. But Destiny broke Moira's naive dream. She knew just how much humans hated mutants. If the humans were to find out that there was a cure, they would use it on absolutely everybody, regardless of that mutant's wish, and then wipe out the entire mutant kind in the end. While Moira was sure it didn't really matter what Destiny did because of her powers, Destiny seemingly managed to read her mind and decided to correct Moira's thought. Moira's reincarnation power would only work if her powers were activated when she was a young teen. If she dies before that, then she's just gone like everyone else. So Moira doesn't actually have an infinite life glitch like she thought she did originally. In reality, Moira has 10 lives, 11 if she makes the right choice. Destiny warned Moira not to get smart. Thanks to her precognition abilities, every time Moira tried to lead that life to cure people of their mutant powers, Destiny would come after her and kill her. If Moira tries to get Destiny first to kill her, the latter would of course foresee it and prevent that happening. The only way Moira could be prevented from seeing Destiny was if she worked with her to help her kind, the mutant. Once Destiny was sure that Moira understood, she asked Pyro to burn Moira alive slowly so that she would remember the conversation and the repercussions of this failed life. And with this abrupt curtain call on her third life, Moira knew that her next lives had to be different. Surely, fourth time must be the charm. Starting her fourth life in urgency, Moira threw herself into research, trying her best to understand the mutant-human dilemma. Now that she was not prejudiced against the mutants, she opened up to Charles Xavier when she met him in Oxford. The closer they got, the more Moira realised just how wrong her initial opinion of Charles had been. Slowly, she fell in love with the professor and eventually they were married. This marriage lasted quite a while. They opened Xavier's school for gifted youngsters together and she stood by his side for years. She saw the first time the X-Men were formed, she saw their fall, the rise of the new X-Men, on all the adventures along the way. However, this life of hers came to an end when both herself and Charles were caught by the mutant hunting Sentinel. Peace may not be the answer. Angry. Moira felt angry when she was born the 5th time around. She knew that the peaceful plan that she and Charles had worked on was going to fail. So to prevent this tragedy from happening again, Moira chose a rather radical path. She decided that she was going to meet with the violent tendencies of humankind with an equal or greater amount of violence. She took whatever she could from her parents and ran away from home. She approached Charles Xavier roughly 10 years before they usually met. Once she met him, she let him go through her mind and access her memories, learning about all the events from her past 4 lives. Learning about the failure of his eventual plan radicalized Charles. Instead of opening a school for young children, he and Moira built an army of young children together. They isolated this army from the rest of the world, creating a mutant safe haven known as Faraway. However, as the number of mutants grew, the Sentinels were eventually able to target the place. Moira bravely went against the Sentinels, but ended up with the grievous injury. She was left in a coma for a year and eventually passed away when a genocide occurred in Faraway. The future and its lack of changes. When it comes to her 6th life, Moira ends up continuing for about 1,000 years in the future. In this timeline, the mutants lost the war against the Sentinels. Most of them were wiped away, but Moira wasn't. Neither was Wolverine and a handful of others. All of the mutants were kept in the personal zoo that was owned by the librarian, in charge of all the knowledge of the current species. The librarian explained to Moira that while Sentinels were commendable threats to the mutants, all the Sentinels did was buy time for the humans to bring about the new species known as the post-humans. These post-humans have complete control over both biology and technology. Now that they had reached their peak in evolution, the Homo novissima no longer wanted to have their body physically present. Instead, they wanted their consciousness to be absorbed and infused into machines. So the species had contacted the Phalanx, the all-encompassing species able to take over anything they touch. This also meant that once the Phalanx had paid Earth a visit, there wouldn't be anything left to call Earth. The world was going to be destroyed, and there was nothing she could do about it. This is where Moira realized that the only thing to be blamed for the fall of mutant kind was not man or machine, but man's ability to control the process of evolution and the environment around them. When she saw Wolverine launch a surprise attack on the librarian, she asked him to kill her as well, hoping to reincarnate and prevent this bleak future. Sentinels, invention or discovery. Moira, in her 7th life now, knew that she needed to get rid of the Sentinels first. If she could get rid of the machines, then the humans wouldn't get enough time to turn into post-humans. So Moira spent her entire 7th life hunting down the Trask family. One by one, she killed Bolivar Trask and the family tree, wiping out their existence totally, hoping this would lead to the Sentinels never being designed. However, this is when she realized that in fact Sentinels were like fire. It was only natural that their creation would be discovered. When Bolivar Trask was no longer alive, it simply meant that she had prevented Bolivar Trask from being the first man to make Sentinels. Moira died in this lifetime after having seen a master mold Sentinel factory. Mutant terrorism for the win! After failing to save the lives of mutants so many times, Moira decided to adopt a rather aggressive, radicalized philosophy. She joined hands with Magneto and helped him conquer America. She also helped him create the House of M, but when the War of M was being waged, Magneto was betrayed by mutants who joined hands with humans to overthrow him. Magneto's death and her imprisonment radicalized Moira even more. She was killed in this lifetime when she tried to escape prison. After all these experiences, Moira realized that neither Charles nor Magneto were strong enough to ensure the future that she wanted would become a reality. She knew she needed somebody stronger instead. So who did she choose to help rain hell upon humankind? Enter supervillain Apocalypse. After spending that last life behind Charles and Magneto, Moira decided that she needed someone stronger than both of them. So she decided that she would wake up Apocalypse, the recurring supervillain who can destroy whatever he wants in his path without even missing a beat. He killed both Charles and Magneto and continued on with an endless war against humankind, known as the Apocalypse War. While this seemed good enough at first, this war led to the birth of Nimrod, the intelligent and adaptable Sentinel who was impossible to destroy. Apocalypse and Moira both planned out a way to destroy the Nimrod, but before they could get to it, she ended up getting injured in an assassination attempt on Apocalypse. She was left in stasis for 16 years, and when she woke up, she learned that the X-Men team that Apocalypse and she had formed was pretty much dead and gone, except for herself and War. War killed her so that she could be reincarnated and prevent this horribly bleak future from ever taking place. One last shot. Moira remembered that Destiny had told her that she would only have 10 lives, 11 if she was careful with her choices. Looking back at the track record so far, Moira knew that if she wanted to make a difference, she had to do it this time round herself. In her 10th life, she went back to her old friend Charles. This time, without pretending like they had never met before, Moira let Charles read her mind and find out everything that had happened in the past 9 lives. She told him that she wanted to join all 3 great mutant leaders together this time round. But Moira actually went ahead with this so that she could depower all of them and save them from humanity and AI together. She kept on manipulating them, hoping to turn them into whatever they needed to be. She married Joseph McTaggart, a lover of hers, and she moved back to Scotland. But like a lot of women's experiences after marriage, Moira found out that her lover was actually quite an abusive man. She left him and fled to New York, but Joseph found her there and he sexually assaulted her, leaving her hospitalized and pregnant. This pushed Moira away from that man even further, and while they never divorced because Joseph wanted to drag the whole marriage on, she kept his son hidden from him for 20 years. What was ultimately surprising for viewers was when Moira got re-engaged with Joseph after all of this, but it turns out this was part of the plan that Xavier had created. Charles Xavier wanted to create a mutant with the power to warp reality and wanted to use this mutant with others to overcome death itself. Using her knowledge as a geneticist, Moira picked out the best matches for her and Charles, resulting in the birth of Proteus and Legion. But all of this planning and scheming, well, it began to worry Moira. She was scared that she was breaking Charles by being romantically involved with him. One might say that this breakup led to Charles snapping and lobotomizing Magneto, hence creating Onslaught. At least she was successful in academia. Despite everything else, Moira McTaggart managed to lead a brilliant career in genetics. She won a Nobel Prize for her work and founded a mutant research center on Muir Island. The last time she was on Muir Island, she was working on creating a mutant cure and died in Pyro's hands, but this time round it was different. Once she had established the center, she reached out to Charles once more and they started talk. Together they discussed the possibility of opening a school to help young mutants use their powers. This is how she became the silent partner in founding the school where all of our favourite mutant heroes hail from. When Moira's son started showing destructive mutant powers, she did try to cure him, but she was never able to, leading to her leaving him trapped in the Mutant Research Centre for many years to come. He adopted a daughter, Rain Sinclair, who quickly won Moira's heart with her powers and personality. Using death as a sweet escape. It was no secret that Moira had been manipulating Magneto's genes to ensure he turned out to be the kind of man that Moira needed him to be. But Magneto had no say in this, and when he learned about what Moira had been doing to him in secret, he once again abandoned her and Xavier and went down his own radical path. This led to Moira realizing that perhaps she'd gotten too involved in this world and had to step back. This is what she did, and she hid in the shadows. When the first human contracted the legacy virus, Moira and many others began to work on a cure frantically because time was running out. She had to quarantine herself in the research center to ensure that her work went well, but Mystique and her brotherhood of mutants showed up on Muir Island to destroy the cure. It turns out the legacy virus was created by Mystique herself to wipe away humans. Moira was injured heavily in the attack, and so she used a Shi'ar golem to fake her death. She made it look like she barely held on to life until she reached Charles, and then she died in his arms. Creation of the mutant safe haven, Krakoa and its story. With Moira dead in the public eye, Charles, Moira and Magneto, who had later joined the team again, could work on the resurrection protocol secretly. This led to them forming the Five, a group of mutants who can resurrect any other mutant. Despite her achievements, Moira remained hidden from the public for a long time. She watched on from the shadows as Charles created Krakoa and got the place for international recognition and a global amnesty for mutants. She even got a particular secret place in Krakoa just for herself. But this wasn't enough for Moira to rest easy. She knew that Nimrod might be created, as she and Charles tasked several technopathic mutants to keep an eye on Nimrod's technological thresholds. When the mutants learned about the self-aware adaptive sentinel factory that was about to be made, known as the Mother Mold, Charles and Magneto sent the X-Men to destroy the place and prevent the Nimrod from ever being created. Now it was time for the Quiet Council to be formed in Krakoa, with the threat of Nimrod gone. Moira had suspicions about Emma, but there were bigger things she had to worry about. Mystique said she would only join the council if Destiny was brought back to life. Moira had no intention of doing that on Krakoa because if Destiny was there, then Moira's lifelong secret of the failures of the mutants would be out. But Mystique didn't want Moira around. Mystique wanted to depower Moira and make this timeline the final one she had. She was more than happy to hunt Moira, which led to Moira fleeing away from her. Mystique did ultimately depower her, and that left her feeling bitter and betrayed. While living with Dr. Jane Foster, Moira learned that she had stage 4 lung cancer brought on by the Krakoan environment. Over the years, Moira had gone through lifetimes worth of trauma, which definitely made her angry, but until now she had been able to control all that. But after learning that Krakoa was responsible for her failing health, she had had enough. She assaulted Krakoa, hoping to get her powers and restore the timeline. Her hope was to cheat death, live on forever, so she spoke with Arnab Shakladar, the billionaire. Arnab believed her after she told him about the reincarnation powers and Krakoan resurrection protocols. He made a mnemonic copy of Moira and stored it in a techno-organic body. Knowing this body would activate the moment she died, Moira held nothing back. She lured Banshee into a trap, killed him, skinned him, and wore his skin to enter Krakoan gates. When she did manage to get the neutralizer gun to get her powers back, Professor X noticed her and wanted to reach out. His explanations went on deaf ears because Moira was sure that her people had betrayed her. She wanted to wipe out every mutant for good. This whole time she was being chased by a phalanx-controlled Logan from her 6th life, making Moira believe that her plan of depowering everyone was definitely the way to go. By shooting at this phalanx-controlled Wolverine, she depowered him so that the techno-virus could take over her completely, but she instead died of her injuries from the assault. In her dying breath, she cursed Charles Xavier for her fall and vowed to get revenge. Her 11th life. With her physical body dead, Moira's mnemonic copy was activated. She crawled out of her grave and started her 11th life. She was now this machine-encoded consciousness, the perfect example of augmented intelligence, man and machine operating as one. The irony that she became one of the precursors of the deadly human-machine supremacy from many of her futures wasn't lost on us. She still wanted to eliminate the mutants, and now that she had become this man-machine combined, there was no stopping her from doing this. She could just re-upload her mind and be back as many times as was necessary. She became the very same threat that she'd been trying to avoid for years, and she joined hands with Phelan and Dr. Stasis to exact revenge on the mutants. Marvelous other appearances of Moira. Moira McTaggart left fans hooked to the comic book panels as her backstory was explored. But what about her appearances on screen? Were they able to capture fans' attention like her comic book counterpart? Well, let's find out. Film appearances. Believe it or not, Moira McTaggart has shown up in the movies. In X-Men The Last Stand, Olivia Williams plays Moira, who shows up time and time again, but in brief cameos. She was shown in Xavier's ethics class, and after Xavier had died, she was seen sobbing next to Beast at his funeral. But the more memorable Moira McTaggart is played by Rose Byrne in X-Men First Class. Here, Moira is an undercover CIA agent who sees members of the Hellfire Club use their powers to manipulate Colonel Hendry. When she realized that the mutants were trying to start World War III, she recruited Charles, Eric and Mystique as CIA agents. Together they stopped Sebastian Shaw from having his plans come to fruition. It was revealed that she was the one who gave the name X-Men to the mutant hero team. We see her return in X-Men Apocalypse once again, playing the role of a supportive mutant ally. Animated series. In the X-Men animated series, Moira McTaggart is the leading scientist who specializes in studying mutants. She plays the role of an ally who looks at mutants as her friends. She has a son, Kevin, who has mutant abilities, and when Kevin runs away, Charles and the X-Men help Moira to go get him back. She tried her best to free Jean back when the latter bonded with the Phoenix Force. This Moira also helped the X-Men by contacting the Shi'ar Lalandra when Professor X was dying near the end. This version of Moira isn't bad at all. Lally Cadeau portrayed this leading scientist with a certain liveliness that makes the character quite likable. Now, in X-Men 97, the sequel to the original show, which was released in 2024, we see Moira as the sole human on the Council of Genosha, the mutant nation created by Magneto. In episode 5, we see this mutant nation brutally attacked by the Sentinels, and Moira was one of the many victims of the attack. The creator of the show later clarified that Moira had indeed been vaporized in the attack. But as fans who followed the Jonathan Hickman storyline, we know that this might not be the last time that we see Moira. Marvelous verdict. Moira McTaggart is a tragic character. There's no denying that. Previously portrayed as just a human ally with Jonathan Hickman's storyline, Moira is now lit up in a whole different light. Her troubles, her trauma, her experiences, when considered, explain why she's so hell-bent on killing the mutants. And honestly, you can't blame her for it. And it would be quite interesting to watch her plan her revenge now that she is not bound by fears of death. And of course, if you like the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't done so already. Otherwise, have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.